Hey there, party people. I just had the unbelievable pleasure of interviewing Dr. Stephen Murphy, the Chief Operating Officer of FocalPoint Education. FocalPoint is a technology firm helping states and superintendents automate their data with APIs, integrations, and real time reporting. Stephen and I talked about all ranges of topics, ranging from EdTech, what's wrong, what problems technology can solve in the education space, where AI is changing education, and actually how to grow your business in the education space. And lastly, my favorite part of the conversation was around authentic leadership and how we can be better leaders, topic he is really well versed in. So please enjoy Dr. Stephen Murphy.
Okay.
All right. So I am here with my friend and brother, Steve Murphy. How are you?
Doing very well. Yeah,
Good.
glad to be here.
Thanks for making the time. So we are going to be talking ed tech, all things. We'll talk business development and growing your ed tech business, but we also want to talk about like technology challenges.
Sure.
But first, I'll just give a little introduction about you. You can fill in the white space. But
Okay.
I mean, like you're so accomplished. I'm jealous and I hate you, right? So like collegiate basketball player, father of 4 kids, PhD. You've been a president. Well, you're president, division president at Cognia, which where you ran like most of the country's assessments, right?
We took on a small portion, but it was good. It was
Yeah,
fun.
and now
Yeah.
you're the COO at FocalPoint, and so I want to hear about that experience. What did I miss?
Sure. Nothing too big. I mean, it's been an interesting ride. I was had the opportunity to meet somebody recently and walk them through what I've done over the past 20
Okay.
years. And so started out as for my PhD as a baby psychometrician working at a company called Pearson. And from there, the way they were growing afforded me the opportunity to grow with them.
Okay.
So I continued to take on into a leadership role and get the opportunity to work across a variety of states, which kind of set the ground for a transitional role then into the current role, became an executive at Cognia. So
Okay. Did you want to go into like support for higher ed or education in general? Is that what you were thinking with your PhD?
I don't think
Because
so,
that's an
no.
organizational psychology, right?
Yeah, it's an industrial organizational psychology. Not at all. I had no anticipation of ever, when I started, certainly going to education. And then even at the finish line, if it wasn't for an old boss of mine who had transitioned over to Pearson and said, hey, there's this whole industry called education assessment. There's this job called a psychometrician. It's really unique. It's a niche job and it pays really well. You should try it out. I
Yeah.
was like, sure, if it pays well
Yeah.
and I'm guaranteed a job, this works.
Yeah.
So I joined him at Pearson, and we set up a satellite office in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and we worked long hours, incredibly hard. At Pearson at the time had taken on so much work, and I think, through that struggle and some of those times that were really hard, allowed us to learn so much about the work. And so when I look back at that, and I'm with a more junior, or I've done internships each summer with at least 2 interns per year for probably a good part of 20 years. I can then help mentor. So like when I was at a conference this past week, I probably saw 15 interns that had worked with me. And now I've gone all the way up from like when I first had my first interns to more recently, some are now VPs at organizations across the country. So it's been great to see them grow. And then still remember the internship they had with me is pretty crazy.
Oh, well, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so bring us up to today. So tell us about Focal Point. I know you guys do a lot of automation around ed tech technology.
Yep.
Can you just tell me about the solution? And I want to dive in just to the ecosystem of education technology in general.
Yeah, it's a great question. So from the perspective of education technology, our primary, maybe I should start with our starting place. So we try to solve the problem of a couple of things within education that were really complicated. One is managing student information within a year and then across years. So they came up with this program called Statewide Longitudinal Data Systems. A lot of it is, at first was supported by the federal government in terms of funding and grants because it was such hard work. So for Georgia, actually, our CEO founder developed the first statewide longitudinal data system for the state of Georgia. And in addition to that, brought things like single sign-on, which is common nomenclature across industries. He was the first to do it in education.
Okay.
So he set the ground for that, and then also was the first to develop APIs and other ways of integrating data. So he became really facile in understanding how to make data work and how to make sophisticated data models speak to each other. So that therefore our core of our business is around tying data together. And so what he's done as over time is built that out into one is a really next generation type reporting system where if a student takes an assessment, we can turn around and get them the results in a variety of diagnostics to better understand how they're learning. In addition to that, then that's sort of our reporting platform is sort of our education technology ecosystem. Over time, then he's built out assessment so we can manage items, author content within our platform, and then also set up test administration, test delivery. Then we have all the data we need to report.
Oh, wow. So who's the core customer for these services? Is it the state testing agencies or is it the colleges? Like who?
Primarily, we work with districts and states.
Okay.
Yeah. So our first client was states around this idea of this statewide longitudinal data systems. But as we've built assessments for states and now also work with a lot of districts. In fact, just this past week, I was demoing for a potential client in Memphis, Shelby County.
Okay. What's the benefit for them? Because a lot of their funding is tied to how they perform. So is it for them to get richer data so they can actually, perform better for not just for students, but for funding?
Yeah, it is important for funding. Each district has its own flavor of what they're looking for, but in many ways, there are some things that are similar. One is like, how is my student progressing through the year relative to the instruction materials I'm teaching them at certain points in time? And are they prepared enough for end of year expectations? Now, the way that we assess that here in the U.S. is through these statewide summative assessments.
Okay.
But so they're looking for preparation for that, and then just making sure that the students are learning at a pace they think is important to continue through the grade and then into the next year of schooling.
Okay. And so how do you protect the students' data, right? Because now we're actually talking about an individual, how they're progressing, and you're tying it to curriculum.
Yep.
Why do I say anonymize it? Or?
We do. We anonymize that data. But there are always PII data that we are handling, right? Because we have to make sure that this individual student, that we're assessing them on these items and that they're associated with a teacher in the classroom and even in some cases associated with a grade book. So for many schools, they have what they call a student information system, but also like their like gradebook and Google Classroom, for example, captures students' grades. They also have courseware and curriculum attached in there. Locally in Fulton County in Atlanta, for example, they use Infinite Campus. Okay. So within Infinite Campus, you can deliver assessments. You can manage your own information as a student or as a parent. I can log into my student's account. But then in addition to that, we share data back and forth around these assessment results. So we do handle PII. And so we therefore have to go through a lot of regulations to make sure that we're securely protecting that data, both at rest or we're communicating back and forth in transit. Yes. So in both cases, we're securely in their data. And
encrypted, as it says.
Encrypted, yes, correct. And so in order to demonstrate that, there's a couple of things that we've done through the years. One is a lot of ISO type standards and making sure that we comply with those. Most recently, we've gone through an audit to get what we call SOC 2 Type 2 compliant. And then,
that was fun, I bet.
Yeah, and continues to be so. Yeah,
they're not fast and they're not cheap.
That's both true. And then in addition to that, right now we're actually going through what's called a CCMI, and that's probably the highest in terms of providing an independent audit about how you're securing data based on PII and things like that. So locally within, domestic US, we meet requirements called FERPA. And then internationally, we meet a lot of the EU requirements as well.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Okay. All right. So let's shift gears a little bit, going from, all right, so we got the technology, we know the problems, we know what you're solving, but you're selling into governments. And I want to, since this is a growth podcast, we talk about, how do we get government leads? How do we actually sell into government? You brought up compliance. Like, it's crazy. As a vendor, we have all these security hurdles we now have to represent just to even be credible, to be at the
That's
table,
correct.
because you have this vendor supply chain that has to be totally credible on their side. So everyone I choose has to have this compliance, have all these things. So like for you, getting leads, being, compliant, once you come to the table, is it like a bake off where you're against three other, like-minded competitors? Are you going in with another contractor? I mean, tell us what your world is like, getting leads, closing leads.
Sure.
What does that whole process look for you?
Yeah, well, I think there's a couple of different ways to think about it. One of the most important things that you can do in order to develop strong leads is to have key relationships with key people.
Okay.
So to the extent that you have those strong relationships, then they know that when you're responding to an RFP, to a request for proposals, they know something about you.
Right.
So for many of the states, especially ones where we're positioned well, we have had a relationship with the client, even if we're not currently doing any services for them, so that they are prepared for the type of services we can provide, how we go about it, doing that, and then making sure they can trust us.
Right.
That what we're putting on paper affirms what they believe to be true, not something new that they never heard about us.
Right.
So certainly building relationships is one key area. Now, of course, having a relationship doesn't result in any work until they release something like a request for proposals, which is the primary driver for our work. So we'll see a RFP released, and then we will work to respond to it. So just recently, as an example, these for states in particular can get quite extensive. One of the RFPs we just responded to had almost 300 requirements.
Wow. And
to not only respond to those requirements, plus then also to have referrals, resumes, show samples of our work, our response was almost 1,600 pages.
Wow.
And you got to number them. You got to meet all of these compliance around submission. And then what they do is, especially for more recent times when so much of our services are delivered through technology, we had almost 150 compliance statements that we had to say that we would comply to, plus show evidence for how we would comply to it. Oh, okay. So it's quite extensive. I mean, it goes as deep as you can go into an organization. Now, on their side, they're having to deal with very extensive responses, but that's what they ask for.
Yeah, they have to check every box. And so it's all about the trust factor. So, I mean, in terms of, so what % of your deals have an RFP associated with them? Is it 100%?
For us, I would say it's closer to 90, 95. Okay. There's a couple that work outside of that, but for the most part, we're driven from RFPs.
The other ones are usually like add-ons, or where you already have like a foothold.
Correct.
And they're just adding on a service.
That's correct.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah. So net new, you anticipate an RFP, you're trying to make that relationship. We are trustworthy. So it's not a surprise when they get the response. Okay. So talking about the RFP process, is it a team of writers? What does that department look like?
Yeah, that's a great question too.
Is it now AI? I want to get into that too.
Yeah, no. So it's actually a mix.
Yeah.
We do have a team of proposals, writers, as well as then someone who we call a proposal lead. Let me step back a minute and just say, from a business development perspective, we first have a person who's in business development.
Right.
They're helping align our organization with potential clients, positioning us, and then trying to get meetings in advance of the RFP. So they're working with me, for example, to see if I can get an audience with a superintendent of a state or with some of their cabinet or some leadership, so that we can go in and they can learn about my experiences in the industry, how we know as a EdTech firm that we can meet what they're looking for. And so the business development is sort of our lead out there, wetting the market, so to speak.
Are those superintendents open to that meeting in advance of an RFP typically? Yes and no?
It's a mixed bag.
Yeah.
You got to make it valuable. What value may they have from meeting with you? Yeah. And so you got to make it important to them, and that you understand their state, you understand the kinds of things they're looking for, and it's a worthwhile meeting to have. And then, of course, if you ever get that meeting, you got to show up and be ready to address that question. Add value. They have a lot of things on their plate, as you can imagine. And so they're looking for you to help them solve problems, as well as then to do things well. And just keep them out of the media. Yeah. Don't do any mistakes, and we'll have a great relationship.
And run a great RFP process. Maybe educate what should and shouldn't be in the RFP. Self-serving, but actually adds value to what they should be looking for. Right?
Yeah, that's a really good point. To the extent that in advance of the release or even the writing of the RFP, if you in your for sort of business development avenues can help influence it, the better.
Right.
Because then you can see what's coming, you know how to write to it, and it's written for you.
Yeah, well, if you spent so much time on a compliance piece or a security piece that you know your other vendors have, like that should be in your RFP because it is critical. And we worked for 10 years to do this, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's super interesting.
Yeah. So then once the RFP is released, we have a proposals team. Oftentimes we work with subcontractors because with a few exceptions, now it's only down to 2 that can provide the full end-to-end services. Most companies are partnering in order to provide a full, complete solution.
Because this is a big project.
There's a big projects, and usually multi-year and et cetera, et cetera. So we work through understanding the requirements first. We have a proposal manager who looks at all of what the key requirements are. What do we have to comply to submit? Because there's a lot of minimum requirements around the structure of your response. If you don't do that well, they'll kick you out of the door. And so therefore, those are really important things to do. And then we assemble a team of writers. Oftentimes, there are technical portions that are technically orientated in manner. When I talk about technical, there's kind of 2 elements of that. One is, of course, technology.
Right.
And then the other is the technical side of the service that we provide, like developing assessment, writing items, all of the measurement properties that go into doing assessment well. And that's kind of where I fit in a little bit from that perspective. So we go through it, and usually takes, it depends on the state. Most often about 6 to 8 weeks to turn around a response. Districts can be much faster because there's usually less requirements and they just don't have the time to wait. So they're looking for a quicker turn on it. But then, of course, we go through the whole assembly. We do multiple reviews. There's methods that you can follow from a proposal writing perspective, where you'll have like kind of content going in first, then you'll have in the Shipley language. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Shipley. Pink team review, red team review, gold team review.
I haven't heard pink team. Okay, I knew red team.
Yeah, so there's all these
your
layers.
Next level.
Yeah, there's layers of review you do. Wow. Now, we're small, so we kind of merge many of those together. But the most important is what I would consider gold team white glove, where, from you're doing 2 things. One is from an evaluation perspective, have you written to all the requirements?
Right.
Can you get in the shoes of those that will be reading it and evaluate that? Like, to be earnest around, are you writing well? And the other is just making sure it's clean and there's no typos. And so there's this sort of editorial pass that occurs. The response is formatted, as you can imagine, 1,600 pages. It's a lot of materials to be managing. And to get it so that it has a table of contents, that you can orientate the evaluation team through how you've approached responding, are all things that we try to weave into the response.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's shift to AI. So let's talk about AI, how that's changing RFP writing, your writers. I mean, all those things like cleaning it, reviewing it, gold team, pink team. I'm sure AI now is able to handle a lot of that for you. But then on your solution side, if you could comment on it, how that's changing EdTech in general too. So 2 questions there. Start with the RFP side.
Sure. So from an RFP perspective, oftentimes, so like just recently, and for those who haven't seen it yet, there's a Google new AI thing called Notebook LM.
Yep.
It's really good. Creates a podcast.
Yes, it does.
And so I just recently came across it, and so I fed it some of the RFP we're responding to right now, follow-up Q&A, and then I gave it some prompt and asked it to create a podcast. So then I was able to turn around, and when I was driving, I listened to it. I was like, oh, that's an interesting insight. Oh, I didn't think about it like that.
From your own proposal, you made a podcast?
No, it was from an RFP.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so we're also going to do it from our proposal side too, once we've written it.
Yeah.
But what it now allows us to do is to lay out the landscape, how we can think about themes, what may be some key ways to differentiate. And so then that's like the platform by which we begin. So then using another AI, generative AI that I have access to, I'll feed it the RFP, and then I'm going through now and looking at a requirement, and I'm prompting it on ways to respond. So a lot of it is driven off of AI with, I would say, well thought out, well planned prompting and guidance. Then there's, of course, review and evaluation. Does the text make sense? What can I improve? So we're kind of harnessing the power of it, and allows us to scale and move much more efficiently than we would otherwise.
Yeah. I mean, what we find is like even the research is saying if you're a coder that uses AI, you're usually, 20% better. Like, it, what was it? It was like 40% increase across all coding with AI. But then when they unpack the data, it was typically the best coders that were 40% better anyway that were using the AI. And that was the bump.
Right.
It wasn't like if you're not a good writer, you're still not going to be good, even if you use AI,
Right.
right?
And so it's interesting they say that because we can see when people have struggled to understand how to use AI effectively, and it becomes a lot of noise.
Yeah.
And actually can detract from providing a good sound response. Because at the end of the day, whatever it is that you say within there, the RFP and contracting process works where you have the RFP, your response, then the Q&A that may occur, or any negotiations, and then the contract. But they all work in an order of precedence. And so if we have noise or something that we're not willing to do within the RFP, we'll be held accountable to that.
Right.
So you just can't let it go and then release it. There's got to be like sort of this authentic review, evaluation, scrubbing of the text. And so that's one of the roles I end up playing at the end, is to make sure none of that's slipping in.
Do you think your RFPs are getting a first pass now by AI on the government side?
I hope they are.
Yeah.
Yeah, if I was in their shoes, I would. There's
so
no
just
doubt.
Robots selling robots before Steven shows up to actually give his pitch, right?
Yeah, that it certainly is possible. Yeah.
Yeah. So what about on the other side? What are you using on the tech side for students? Well, what is the impact on students? Are we seeing assessments go down with AI? Or are we seeing assessments are kids getting smarter? Or?
I don't know the answer to that question. Yeah, it's a great one. I do see that it is diverse in the way that schools seem to be sort of engaging with it. Mm-hmm. Some are like diving right in. They've even built an on-premise AI, or I guess a corpus of data that then will be used to drive the AI within the school building.
Oh, okay.
And so they have like a protected server. It's in-house, and they're like all in. Everything they do is going through the AI, and they're teaching and tooling students then to be effective users of AI. And I think it's certainly one way to approach it. Others are using it, saying, okay, you can use AI. Tell me what you did. And it's part of the learning experience. And others are saying don't. And to me, the ones that are saying don't are going to be left behind as teachers, because the students are.
Yeah.
And more than often than not, I would say, at least from my experience, many students are engaged in some form of use of AI.
Yeah, so it's just like marketing. Like you have old school marketers who are still hell bent on this one-to-many conversation that I have this great brand, I have this great idea, everyone needs to hear about it. So I'm just going to megaphone out this one idea to the many. Whereas AI now gives us this many-to-many conversation, like in education. Like the AI is highly customized to the student and where they're at, just from fundamentals, or even just what would you call it? Just competency point of view and where they should be going, their learning style. What are they readers? Are they visual? Are they auditory? And let's give them the best modality. But here's the topics you're weak on, and let's beef up that. And so, I think just many-to-many conversation use with AI in education is fascinating to me.
I would agree. I think it's a really good way to frame it. One of the things that at least I've seen from a policy, certainly among the states, is for the federal government to not overweigh too much regulation. At least help engage with the states on trying to figure out what is the best ways that from within a classroom, within the learning experience, students can engage in AI. One of the things that a lot of states and even districts also reflect back on are prior experiences around technology where they failed to keep up with the pace of its use.
Right.
So cell phones is certainly in that area.
Yeah.
But social media uses.
Yeah.
And they felt like they were behind where the students were, and therefore always playing catch up to the technology, and therefore they're trying not to do that with AI.
Therefore, lock it out.
Yeah. And so then you become like ban this, ban that, and it becomes policies and regulations, and then hard to manage. When really the idea is to how can we elevate the students' experience so that they can become better stewards of learning.
Well,
right?
the parents start sending their kids to the schools, whether it's private. I mean, the public schools suffer, or the lower income schools suffer because they don't have the access to technology. Like, my kids are getting a laptop day one, and they're highly encouraged to. But there's a downside, right? Like, the school's way behind on security. It's way behind what the kids are actually surfing. My wife's a counselor. Like, the kids are getting into stuff they shouldn't be because the school's just not up to speed and locked down their security. So that's a downside. But the upside is the kids are brilliant on technology.
Yeah,
And they're
no
way
doubt.
ahead. Their brains thinking that next curve.
Yeah, and I think like you said earlier too, that one of the things with education you always got to be caring for is that you're trying to accelerate everybody,
Yes.
right? And so the thing that you want to don't do is where you begin to have these leave behinds where, like you said, those who have access to it, they accelerated that 40% of those like advanced coders, and now you have these gaps growing. And I know that from one of the things that just occurred recently, the National Assessment of Educational Project Progress, those results were released, and it did show that some of the achievement gaps that we were hoping to close have expanded since COVID.
Oh, really?
And so for those who were proficient or seemingly doing well in education continue to grow, and those that are not already struggling got further behind. So then the question may be around is AI, or is there a way with using AI to lever access to help like close that gap?
Right.
And where can we accelerate? So from our perspective, in terms of within education technology as a provider, we are leveraging AI in many ways, in probably as many ways as we can. So some of it is sort of within our own work, not even within RFPs, but how can we help tool ourselves to be better in the work that we're already doing? So as an example, in creating content, we've built a tool out that can generate items using AI technology. We lever the items that we have already in the bank, and then the AI generative tool to plant seeds to create that first item starter.
Oh, interesting.
And then we'll have a content person take it from there. In other areas is in tooling teachers in the classroom. So another example, we have what we call a feedback aid. And what that does for a teacher is that if a student writes a response, they can feed it to our scoring feedback aid, and it'll give the teacher back the results. It will say, here's the score against the rubric, and then here's some qualitative feedback. We allow the teacher to edit any of those things and before they submit it to the student. During that process, we look for things that we may want the teacher to pay attention to, like foul language or students at risk and other areas like that. And we then push that to the teacher to take a look at.
Well, I mean, so like this equality of access with AI, with technology, as FocalPoint as a vendor, I mean, your ultimate job is to drive down cost.
Correct.
To make it cheaper on the state to deliver. I mean, the idea that you're able to provide real-time data or fast data that they can make decisions on where to cut, where to invest. The price of hardware coming down, or just now that we all have supercomputers on our phone now, and like this excuse of access now, you hope it starts going away. But as FocalPoint, as a vendor, driving down costs, I mean, that's got to be one of the things you're trying to solve for these states, right?
Yeah, it's a great point. In some ways, we're trying to find ways that we can be, as a relatively new player to the industry, at the state, it's very difficult for a new entrant into the field, especially around assessment. It's what I would consider a high threshold entry. You have to have referrals from prior experiences, which is hard if you don't have a prior experience. But also you have to be able to demonstrate the ability to scale to the capacity of the state, to serve all the students well. So during an assessment administration window, so just recently here in Georgia, students are taking the Georgia milestones, and they're doing so all at once.
Okay.
So you got to make sure that you can meet the capacity of all those students hitting a system at once, that they have a seamless experience in terms of taking the items. Because the last thing any of us wants is technology to get in the way of that student experience.
Or any errors.
Right.
Lost data, yeah.
Certainly no lost data. And so therefore, that high threshold entry, the state wants to know and have guarantees that you can deliver on that. So kind of going back to from a education technology and where we are as more of a starter company and how do we enter in this, one of the ways is providing more value for that dollar. And so if we're looking for mechanisms to disrupt that way, because we know we have probably one of the most modern technology stacks in the industry because we're new.
Yeah.
And it's built off all cloud bases. It's built leveraging all this AI. And as we continue to build out the system, we're adding features at a pace that's just incredible.
Yeah.
And so we're continuing to kind of plug out. We know what some of the key needs are, building out to that, and we're solving those like not 6 months, not 3 months, like a month.
Days.
Like, and we've got and it's ready, you know,
Yeah.
it's live and in production. And I think that's the areas where we can differentiate. And so for us, it's getting the first couple of key clients,
Yeah.
certainly at the state level, that that can see our value proposition and will go with us.
I love it.
Yeah.
Okay, so one of the cool things where you and I really started connecting was around management, and you come from I guess you've done a lot of investment in yourself on authentic leadership, and I was wondering if you could talk about just your management experience going through that process. What is authentic leadership?
Sure.
I don't know, wherever you want to go with that. I'm all ears. I love hearing you talk about it.
Well, thank you. No, I've enjoyed my, I guess, experience as I've grown in my career from management into leadership, and trying to understand, because when I was getting my degree in industrial organizational psychology, I happened to be studying leadership. My advisor was one of the areas of specialty was in leadership and growing organization and growing leaders. And it was interesting to come from an academic sense into an actual role, managing people, and then trying to lead people and discovering what I could do well and maybe some of the areas I wasn't so successful. So
That's a hard thing to do, to put yourself on the wall and grade yourself.
It is, but it's one thing, I guess, that I don't know if I guess we'll find out whether it turns out to be a success or not, is I've always tried to be introspective and reflecting as I've gone through my experiences. Sometimes I've looked back and say, that wasn't the right thing to do. That wasn't the right way to emotionally approach somebody in that situation. Or I should have challenged them harder. I should have pushed them more. I was too complacent. I allow laissez-faire kind of approach. And so I've balanced that out. And one of the things I'll say and why I gave that background before talking about authentic leadership is it was kind of through the lens of those experiences that, at least for me, allowed the experience of going through the Harvard Authentic Leadership Program became so important, because I could draw from that to understand how I was as a leader, where I've found even today, where I see myself at least most effective as a leader.
Right.
And so what authentic leadership does is it does some really important things. One is it helps you understand what were some of the mechanisms that have facilitated you into becoming a leader, good or bad. So some of your life stories, what were some of the things that were what we call crucibles in the class, but those things you had to fight your way through and overcome. What were some of the key challenges you faced? What was the situation? How did it impact you? What have you done since then? What did you learn from it? And so you had a lot of reflection points.
Right.
The other thing that it did is, in the way that Harvard approaches it, is a lot of case readings on both successful leaders and failed leaders. And what you're trying to do as you read these case studies is understand the interpersonal dynamics. What's going on with the leader? What are they doing well? What are they not? And then what are some of the outcomes? And then, of course, in the terms of the class itself, we each got placed in this pod that we called the Leadership Development Group. And you got to share your story with that small group. You got to share the successes, some of your trials and struggles. Probably within a day and a half, there's already tears.
That's what we call it, giving your testimony.
Yeah.
Giving your testimonies to the business group.
That's right. And so the experience is very real. And therefore, since then, that core group, we've stayed in contact. We'll reach out because everybody knows each other in a way that
Pretty
nobody
vulnerable.
else knows.
Super vulnerable.
You become very vulnerable. And in fact, you read a book about, having vulnerable discussions and how to manage your way through that. But the idea at the end is that how can I be a better leader who is authentically the same no matter what situation I'm in? That I'm not like, I don't go home and I'm one person, then I go to work, I'm another person, then I'm in this social environment, I'm somebody else.
Yeah.
That I'm authentically who I am in all circumstances, and like, what is my purpose? And so like you understand and you create your own purpose statement. And the thing is, you can't come up with it, just it doesn't, if it's inconsistent because your leadership development group will call you out on it.
Yeah. Yeah.
They know you. They can actually write that for you.
Yes.
So they evaluate your purpose statement. They see if it's consistent with all the stories. And so we went through an articulation. We got to write them up and present to our leadership group, our development group, why is that my purpose? And then from there you go on about, how do I hold myself accountable? How do I want to live this out? How do I want to continue to fulfill my purpose in leadership?
Oh, wow.
So you come away from it feeling, I would say that it's both humbling, but then also assures that there are other leaders out there that are following a similar pattern. And so you can always be authentic. And then it's up to the receiver. If they can receive that authenticity well, then that's okay.
Yeah.
And I don't change because of that.
Yeah.
I am who I am. And so, that's something that then I've been kind of steadfast with.
Yeah. I didn't do authentic leadership, but like I do try to be really real with the team at Sure Oak of who I am and what I'm good at, what I'm not. And I noticed, I've been there 2 years now since I bought the company, but I would say the first 6 months, people don't, they don't quite believe it. Quite, it's like, well, I'm going to wait and see, because I've been in corporate America long enough that I'm just going to wait and see how this plays out. Maybe the younger people are more trusting and all in, but like I noticed with my senior team, it took a while for them to really push back on me on certain things. And I love it because just because I'm emotional and I push back on you, I just don't want you to back down. Please don't back down, because I don't get better and make better decisions unless you're actually challenging. And so what I hope they think about me is that I'll change my mind, that I will listen, because I've definitely been in my career where I'm so egotistical. I'm right. Mm-hmm. I'm right. I'm the right leader, and that is never a good place to be. Right. So funny. I was listening to an interview. Was it Tim Ferriss was interviewing Tom Peters about just his history. It's just great. Like he wrote Good to Great. He wrote all these, and Fifth Level Leader was one of the things that he wrote. And he would get all these letters because Fifth Level Leader, they're the timeless companies. They're the lowest ego. They're just like the most powerful leaders. Well, so we started getting all these letters from teams saying, "Thanks a lot, Tom. My CEO just walked in and says he's a fifth level leader now." It's right. Like, they don't believe it unless it is genuine and real. Like, have you done that work? Do you have too much ego? Do you have blind spots that you got to get rid of? Because that's hard when you have a blind spot and someone points it out to you, or you have to figure it out on your own. I mean, that's a hard lesson as a leader, because if you've been in leadership positions, you can go a while before someone calls you on your crap, right?
No doubt at all. And it's a really hard, and I think it's hard to balance about how to get that really authentic feedback.
Yes.
And someone is willing to engage in that difficult conversation with you and be vulnerable themselves, because if you're in
they're taking a risk.
They're taking a risk.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. And so I think that is a really when I find somebody that is willing to actually engage in a conversation like that, you also find that one day they're most likely to become a good, authentic leader too.
Totally.
Because they're willing to be vulnerable and put themselves in a situation where they put themselves at risk.
Yeah, that's great.
So I find encouraged when I see individuals like that.
I love it. The
only other thing I'll say about leadership that at least through the years I've done and kind of really honed in on it, and it's one of those things that sits in the back of my head, and maybe one day I'll write a book.
I'd love to read your book.
Thank you. Yeah. But it is on like how I've approached leadership through the years. And one of the things I always do, especially early on, if I'm in part of a new team, and I felt like that in the end it was a vulnerability that I didn't know that I was doing until I caught the language in authentic leadership. Okay. And what I would do is say, look, this is me as a leader. Here's how I'm going to lead. Mm. These are the things I'm trying to do for you. And these are the things that I'm not going to do. And here's what my expectation is. So, for example, I would go in front of whatever group was, small team, or when I was at Cogni, I was overseeing 200 people. And so every year I'd stand up in front of them and say, hey, this is me as a leader. Mm-hmm. Here's what I'm going to expect. I am going to do everything I can as a leader to make you as successful as possible. Mm. Now, for everyone, that's different. For someone that's advancing and try to work towards leadership, that's one thing. Mm. Someone is trying to be the most successful individual contributor they're trying to be, then that's another thing. Mm-hmm. And then the other thing that I'm going to try to do is that I want to take the pressures of what I call blockers. So in a sense, I'm trying to help facilitate and generate opportunities for the individual to be as successful as possible, while removing things that are blockers from their success. So I try to work on those two dials about opportunity, blocker. And then I say, but in order to do that, there's some things that I think are really important. One is that when we come to work, we're willing to hold each other accountable, that we're authentically at work and we all see a common purpose and we're trying to serve that. Now, if you're coming to work and you don't care, well, that's fine.
Yeah.
But this doesn't really work that well for you. And if we're trying to create a culture of, success in whatever that means for you, then we at least need you to be authentically present at work. Yeah. But if you're trying to skate along, I guess that's fine. But probably I'm not going to have much impact on you. And that's okay too. I'm glad you're here and, maybe you fulfill some of the things that we think are important. But it's unlikely that you could be successful if you want to be. But again, that's up to that individual. So
we have a core value, Sure Oak, is people will forgive mistakes. They won't forgive not caring.
Oh, that is a good way to put it.
That's from your teammates or your customers. Right. If you show your best effort and you have some passion, people will forgive a lot of, stumbling forward. Correct. But as long as you're going forward for them.
Right. And you're
it's
there.
Hard to work with teammates like that.
It is. It's super hard. And, and so then we can go from there and talk about, the value of things like teamwork and what it means to be held in a system of accountability. And so I kind of extend from there. And now since taking authentic leadership, I do add some additional language and framing for that so that they can understand like why I'm comfortable to be vulnerable, that I'm going to be vulnerable. I'm willing to engage in any difficult conversation or any feedback that you might have.
Right.
Because I want that input. And if it's something that you feel strong enough to share, then share it.
Yeah.
And let's work through how we can come to a better solution for everybody involved.
Yeah. Yeah.
So anyway, I've sketched out and outlined some chapters, and maybe AI can help me eventually.
Don't let it write all of it. It's hallucinating, these days.
This is very true.
Stephen, thank you so much for the time on this. So people can see you LinkedIn. Are you on X? Where are you at?
Mostly on LinkedIn.
Okay.
I spend a little time on X, but there's certainly LinkedIn. You can find me out there.
Hey, I really appreciate the time. Any closing thoughts? Anything else?
No, the only thing I can think of is that, at least in my experience and one of the things that even with AI and even with all this technology that we're involved in, people and relationships really matters.
Yeah.
And it matters a lot.
Yeah. People still buy from people.
People still buy from people.
People still work with people. It's important to know.
It is.
Hey, thank you, my friend.
Yeah, thank you.
Right.
Really appreciate it.
Awesome. This was great.
Yeah, you're welcome.
All right. What did we do? How long did we go for?
I have no idea.
40 minutes on that. That was good.
Cool.
That's all we'll need. So let me hit the stop.